I think one powerful distinction in my journey has been like intrinsic reward or intrinsic joy versus doing something as a means to an end. I think one of the ways our intuition and the higher aspects of ourselves speaks to us is inspiration, is just feeling good doing something.
Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, a business podcast about revenue generating partnerships, not a podcast about business time with friends. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Welcome back to the show, friends. We are here with another great guest.
We're so excited about this one.
Episode number, whatever it is now. Who knows? We're
episode a lot.
Yeah. We're having fun.
Today's guest is somebody who I've been following for a while on LinkedIn. I've been reading his newsletter, listening to his podcast. By all definitions that we typically subscribe to, he had a very successful life.
Yeah, had a successful go at it in the software career. I've been swimming circles around this guy for a long time. Never really had a chance to chat or meet, but today we had a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. Today's guest, if you haven't already seen, is Scott Britton. He sold a company to the one, the only Salesforce, which not many people can say. But
I can't say that.
I can't either. Not yet. In that process, he kind of learned that having it all is not necessarily having it all.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So he started to explore what that means. He went down the road of consciousness and how that can truly impact the way you lead and you show up to life and also create the path forward for you. So without further ado, friends, enjoy today's episode with Scott Britton.
Mr. Scott Britton. Here we go.
All right, friends, welcome back. I say this every time, but I really am excited for today's guest. Not that I'm not for anybody else, but I think this story is so interesting because today's guest, Scott Britton, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
On the surface, you have maybe lived the type of air quotes success that most people in tech chase. You know, you've been a founder, you've had a big exit, you've had these titles, and yet you still found yourself kind of searching for more within all of that. I don't want to tell the story for you, but you've sold a company to Salesforce, which is kind of tops. And during that process, you turned your attention inward. And you kind of tried to explore consciousness and maybe even spirituality and like what success looked like maybe inward rather than outward. Just a quick few more accolades so that people kind of know who you are, but you are the founder of Conscious Talent, which I think is awesome. And I do want to learn more about. And yesterday you launched a book.
That's right.
All right. Conscious accomplishment. This is huge. So welcome to the show. You're a dad, you're a podcast host, you're so much more. We're so excited to lean in and talk more with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. And, you know, I love from what I know about you guys, what you're putting out in the world as well. So it should be a fun conversation.
I'd love to know, like, you know, Sam mentioned kind of your background. It's kind of a wild arc, like to get into where you're at now, which I love where you've ended up. And obviously it's not one that you hear every day, especially in this like B2B SaaS go-to-market space, right? Mm-hmm. And it's one that, you know, we're actively trying to take on as well. So I'm very curious, like what pulled you into this journey?
Well, I don't know if I had a choice, you know, and I think that's just kind of how these things go. I mean, I was very hard charging, type A, running my tech company. And what happened is like over a series of years, I started to recognize a level of like intensity about myself and also I would say unhappiness where I kind of just like would look around and be like, how come I don't laugh freely like I used to? You know, how come I'm always thinking about the next thing to do and to optimize? And like, I just started to realize like, okay, maybe this isn't working as well as I thought it was. And, externally, my life did look pretty good. I was living in New York City. I was running a first round capital tech company. I had a lot of, romantic interests in my life. I had a lot of friends. I did everything right. And yet my life doesn't feel how I want it to feel. I had been a meditator for 6 years at this point. That was the thing. It was okay, well, if you're not feeling good, meditate, go to therapy. And it was okay, cool. I did those things. I was one of the earliest people to meditation I know, yet here I was. And so I think the real inflection point for me was I had a friend of mine who threw me a lifeline really and was hey, I'm hosting this ayahuasca retreat. And I had never been into any of that. I had never done psychedelics. I had never really done anything besides drank alcohol. And I was you know what? I've tried everything else. Whatever I'm doing is not working. And, that retreat was my first real altered state of consciousness. I'm not going to tell a long trip story here, but coming out of that retreat, there was just a real clear understanding that there was much more to reality and to who I was than I previously thought. And that was really the start of shifting that same level of earnestness, I would say, and even intensity from the external world to exploring my inner world and my consciousness.
It sounds like you had enough self-actualization or awareness to really understand that, hey, something's not right with me. I like where I'm at externally, but inside it's you mentioned you were unhappy. That's hard for a lot of people to really admit to, especially a lot of high achievers. My biggest question is how do people get there?
As you say, a deeply humbling experience. My life, I went to the right school. I was a successful athlete, college athlete. I had the career. I had the six-pack abs. I had done everything right. And I was kind of pissed off because it was I thought that if I did this, then I would get Y. And yet endless years of reading self-help books, right? And yet here I am. I don't know what the particular thing if anything, did to really recognize my suffering, because that's what we're really talking about here is a recognition of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It just was kind of noticing other people seem to move through life more easily than me. Really just my attention was picking up on that and starting to recognize that was kind of what I actually wanted.
In our society, more particularly, there is a quote unquote roadmap to success. You just mentioned it. You go to the right school, you get this job to get you X. At that point in time, did you know what X was, or were you just kind of following the path because you thought that's what you were supposed to do?
Well, I mean, I definitely was oh yeah, I want to sell I want to start and sell a company. I want to make a lot of money so I can do whatever I want. My awakening journey and consciousness journey started before I actually actualized that vision of selling a company. But you start to have lots of wins, right? With different things, whether it's you're dating the person that you thought would make you happy, or you living in the apartment, or you get the money, or whatever it is. And then you just realize it creates a very temporary blip in happiness.
So let's ground this really quick, because I feel when we say the word consciousness, that could mean maybe people haven't come across this. This could mean a few things. When you say consciousness, talk to us. What does that actually mean?
Well, I think of consciousness as very multifaceted, but at the core, it's an awareness of a subjective experience. And the lineage that I've spent the most time studying also includes, really thinks of consciousness as a platform that incorporates components like the subconscious. So we have our awareness, right? But then we have what enters that awareness. Well, where does that come from? What is that all about, right? It's why do I feel a certain way when something happens? A lot of that's from our subconscious, which is defined by all that which we've experienced. It's also defined by the the sensory perception organs and the capacity for us to take that information in, compare it against that subconscious reference system, and then come up with a response. And so like, I think of our consciousness is like a totality of that, which is contributing to a subjective experience. It's incredibly vast. Like, it's far more vast and complex and nuanced than I knew before I got into any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's also endlessly interesting because it is the core substrate that's creating your experience. When you realize that, you're like, okay, well, I could become really good at organizing all the chips on the board, right? Which is like the whole outside in game. Or I can it's actually a much more intelligent thing to do to directly work on the thing that is creating your subjective experience. And we can get into this, but like, I would actually argue in my life, I've had a lot of strong evidence that it's not only creating my subjective experience, but it's also creating that which I experience in material reality. Mm-hmm. And, to me, it's just like a higher level game.
So let's talk about that. You had mentioned earlier, like, you're in the process of selling a company to Salesforce, and you start to go down this path prior to the actual transaction. How did you kind of exploring consciousness? You've even used the word spirituality before. How did that then influence that transaction, that journey, or did it?
I probably got into this about three-ish years before we ended up selling the business. I spent a year basically just going hard on all spiritual stuff in the in-between times. So it was like, instead of business books, I was reading Ram Dass. I was reading about Buddhism. I was reading all this stuff. I was listening to those types of podcasts. I was, going to Kundalini yoga classes and doing like all this esoteric things after work. And it was like all the in-between times became consumed by this consciousness stuff. But it still felt very compartmentalized. It was like, I did my spiritual practices, and then I go to work and was like a tech dude, and
2 split personalities.
Yeah. And it was like my dirty little secret, and I didn't tell anybody about it. And I lived like that for probably a year. And I met a teacher who basically was like, you need to like start to integrate these things. And part of it was a question that I had, which is like, as a very all-in person, like, if I'm really serious about this, should I be running a tech company? Like, shouldn't I be like some ashram or something? Like, shouldn't I be like going finding a master? And like, here I am in the West Village of New York City, like going out on the weekends and running a tech company and just doing all the same shit I used to do, but just kind of into spirituality now. Basically what she told me, she's like, your growth is exactly where you're at. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to start to notice when you're resisting reality as it is. And she gave me an assignment to basically notice any single time that I was disturbed. And we began to, had a note on my phone, and I would write out every single time I was triggered. And I was like, holy shit, like my life is a trigger fest. And we would go into these, and we would begin to do certain practices that helped me understand the subconscious experiences and patterns and concepts that were creating my experience. And so for a couple of years, I was like, all of a sudden my business became like a dojo for my consciousness journey, where I was just like sitting in a meeting, and I was like, this is interesting, but at the same time, I'm actually more interested in how I'm reacting to everything. When a client didn't get back to me in an email, like, that was interesting, but I'm also holding the complexity of like, well, how is that making me feel? Right. And using all these situations to basically understand why I was getting taken out of peace. What I found is that all of a sudden, like, that game was more interesting than winning in business. Like, understanding why I am the way that I am, and then starting to see the archetypal patterns of the way that reality was unfolding was just more interesting. It was just like endlessly interesting. Right. And as it pertained to the sale, I started to see this pattern of life kind of bringing me the perfect circumstance that was required for my next stage of development, for my next stage of evolution. This is like how my life still works like this, by the way, where it's like, it brings me whatever thing that I need to see. And so with selling our company, I'd done a lot of work around attachments. So attachments is like an idea that like you need to have something to be a certain way in order to feel good. And, one by one, life had started to show me all my attachments. It started to like take away the shit that I wanted so that I would have the capacity to see that I was still attached to it. And with selling troops, we had entered in an M&A process. And basically there was like 3 deals that I thought were going to happen. Like, okay, like we're going to sell the company. You're going to make all this money. Your life's going to change. Amazing. And then like at the last minute, like something would go haywire. And each time that happened, I was like so distraught. I was so annoyed. And I would go and I would do my little exercise of like releasing the attachments and like all that kind of stuff. And then like, it happened a 4th time and it really was at like the finish line. I finally realized like, wow, I'm still attached to to selling my company, to being an exited founder, to the prestige, to all of these things that I thought I wanted. And I was able to get to a place where I was able to truly let go, to truly say, I actually don't give a shit about any of this. And whatever you want to do, universe, I have immense trust in that. And I really meant it this time. And after that moment of surrender and letting go, later that day, I basically got a download of how to rectify the situation that we were in. And a couple of weeks later, we sold the company. And so to me, like that whole sequence of events, you could say it's random. It's not random at all to me, because I think this is like how life works and like how reality works. It's like unfolding for our consciousness evolution. We just often don't see that. And so, I don't think personally, like I'm not sure if the company would have sold, at least not in that fashion, if I hadn't been basically using that opportunity to free myself from the attachment, because it was like when that action occurred, the download came and the entire situation shifted. And I've seen this pattern time and time again. It's like life keeps giving you signs until it hits you over the head. And when you get the lesson, when you actually develop the awareness, then the circumstances shift. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, like this is very core to that particular outcome. And it's very core to positive outcomes across my life.
I love this conversation. I mean, I've seen this in my life too. I'm definitely still on this journey. For people that are listening, one thing I just want to call out and see if you agree or have other thoughts on this is like, consciousness is awareness to start. It's just awareness of you're exactly like you're saying, like, okay, so this interaction made me feel why. And then just being aware enough to say like, but why did it make me feel that way? And like, how can I change the way that I interact with that to make my reality more in sync with what I want? Like, this person's making me really stressed out. I don't want to be a stressed out person. Guess what? I'm in control of that. Like that's not happening to me. I get to choose that. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes. I think that you're referring to kind of the recognition that our reactions are like an us thing.
Yes.
That's 100% true.
To further that point, I think once you start to have that like general awareness of like, okay, I have a little bit of control over the situation, at least how I react to it, then there's a further awareness beyond that of like, I can let thoughts go. I can have an open mind. I can see more possibilities than what maybe was like my boxed in, this is the only choice in front of me. Do you think that in going through this journey, you talked about downloads. Like I want to hang out on downloads for a minute, because that can be a foreign topic to people. Like, what's a download? How are you open to receive a download? How like is this
Mhm.
part of the awareness of just having an open mind to see that.
Yeah. Well, in the same way that you asked the question of like, why did I react the way that I did? I think there's a lot of benefit that to asking the question, what information is entering my awareness? So what thoughts are coming up or feelings? And then where is that coming from? And basically what I started to observe was that there are distinctly different textures of information entering my awareness. And the first time I really experienced that distinct difference was actually during a plant medicine, that initial plant medicine experience, where I connected with what felt like a eternal divine essence part of myself. Like I could have a conversation with another presence in my awareness that wasn't my thoughts, if that makes sense. And so I had an understanding of what that felt like. And as I started to do more spiritual practice and my mind became less cluttered, it was almost as if whatever was blocking the connection to that thing that I experienced started to open. And I started to be able to receive spontaneous information and know like that thing that just entered my awareness, like that ping, like that's just not like a random thing. Like I'm getting information right now and it's coming from a different source than a lot of my other thoughts. And yeah, over time, I began to, with practice, I began to develop a relationship with that. And I also began to learn how to kind of call upon that on demand. I think about like downloads is useful information that's coming from a place that has your best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I also often think that's from, you know, a place like our soul, like our higher self, our true self, whatever you want to call it. It's trying to help us. But the question is just, can we hear it?
Getting to that place of interest is a journey in and of itself, right? I think about the fact that you have to like get to the place where you can let go of these attachments. Very hard for a lot of people, especially those, you know, high achievers and people who are, you know, on the pursuit of something, you know, tangible. And I think what that is all kind of wrapped in is ego. Was it Mad in Charlotte Sam or Charlotte Yoga that was always like, leave your ego at the door, leave your ego at the door. And it's like you're constantly checking your ego in these scenarios and situations, like what really wants this, whatever this is it me or is it this, you know, split personality ego
this.
me
Yeah.
that wants this? And how hard was that for you to address? Because I feel like it's, you know, it's pretty hard for me to be honest.
Yeah. I mean,
Speaking for a friend.
you know, there's definitely like having your cake and eating it too, right? The ego often wants all the things and wants the spiritual and consciousness and awareness and enlightenment and blah, blah, blah. I think at the end of the day, there just has to be like a continuous refining of like, okay, so let's just play that out. Ego gets the thing. Does being you still feel like being you? You know, and for me, it's like, I'd played that game a long time. And I have been humbled many times, right? By like getting or not getting the thing and then being upset. And yeah, I think there's just like at a certain point of that, you're like, you know what? Like what I really want is to feel a certain way. And something outside of myself is not going to create that. That's just where the focus needs to be.
How do you respond when you achieve X? Right? What is it that happens on the inside of you? Like where do you feel joy? Or where do you just feel, you know, happy about something? I think there's two differences in happiness versus joy, and like what actually brings you joy when you accomplish something you've set out to do or something that you're trying to pursue.
I think one powerful distinction in my journey has been like intrinsic reward or intrinsic joy versus doing something as a means to an end. And so like, I think one of the ways our intuition and the higher aspects of ourselves speaks to us is inspiration, is just feeling good doing something. And I think, you know, that's juxtaposed with the ego that's like thinks about things like, well, when I get X, then I'll feel Y. right? And so that it like sets us off on these little like pursuits where it's like the action itself isn't the reason we're doing it. We're doing it for some outcome. Not only is that like a very volatile game to play, it also doesn't actually result in the best outcomes after a certain point. Like for me, like when I'm out of alignment with what I'm supposed to be doing, like with like kind of the direction of like my joy or inspiration, my life gets very difficult. It's kind of like the reality has basically said, we're not going to do that anymore. Like we're not going to reward you for being out of alignment.
Talk to us about what that kind of feels like for you.
It's like really simple. It's like if I do something that's out of integrity, I get feedback very quickly. Like something goes awry. I call it like the narrow path, where in the beginning of this journey of awareness and consciousness, it's like you kind of can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. As you continue to evolve, like my belief is that there's a higher order principle behind the scenes. We can't see it, but it's like an intelligence that is helping shape the material world of form that you're walking through. And it's trying to help you evolve. It's trying to make you a more loving, aware, conscious person. As you go deeper on that journey, the standard gets higher. You know, it's like you just can't get away with things you used to be able to do. And so for me, and the feedback gets really fast. And it's like, so for me, it's like, I mean, I remember I did something out of integrity like 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. I had my house rented for the whole summer on Airbnb. And I was like, woohoo, like all this money while we go travel to Europe. Like, and then I was like, did something out of integrity. 2 days later, Airbnb canceled. And it's like so consistent for me, like how quickly that type of stuff happens that like, I just can't do it anymore. But I've also been at this for a long time. And there's a little bit of a gentleness there, but that's kind of the trend that I see.
It's like you're having to answer to a guide now.
And it's a benevolent one, right? It wants you to be spending more time in joy. It wants you to be spending more time in the things that you were meant to, that you came into this earth experience to do. And so it's actually trying to help you. It might seem like a bitch, but it's actually trying to help you. And so, you know, you just learn through enough of those type of like losing however much money or whatever type of feedback you get from life that, hey, I just need to like sow into the inspiration and the joy and the good stuff, because that's a source of intelligence that's trying to help me.
I'm playing devil's advocate here. Somebody's listening. They have a job that gives them all of the external things they need, money, a title, whatever, but they're just unhappy. And they don't have an obvious way to shift into joy, to like follow that thread that you're talking about. What do you say to that person? How do we help them start this journey?
Find that path or that guide.
I would say a couple things. Well, first is my belief is that our natural state is joy, is love, is trust, is openness. And so the way to return to that natural state is to remove the layers that obstruct it. That is a consciousness thing. And so when you notice yourself, like, you know, eventually it was like my teacher was originally, you know, notice when you're disturbed, but then it became notice when your heart is closed, right? Notice when you're judging. Notice when you're perceiving things a certain way that aren't aligned with the natural state, and then see what in your consciousness is creating that. And so like, you know, for that person who's like, I don't feel joyful, it's like, well, you can start to investigate why that is. That's a really good thing to do. There's a lot of different practices and exercises that people can do to do that. And I'm happy to, you know, link to some meditations on my website that teach this, or my book definitely teaches this. The other thing I would say is for in terms of like finding the activities that you enjoy, is I encourage people to treat that like a source of intelligence versus an unproductive use of time. Kind of earlier in my journey, I would like have my big to-do list of all the shit that I had to get done for like a lot of stuff I didn't like doing. And then I would have like writing, or I would have podcasting, or just like things I liked doing. And I was like, okay, I'll get to that once like the most important high priority things get done. And it was just seen as like not a high leverage use of time. And what I started to do was to treat it like an experiment where it's like, well, what happens if I just allow myself like to do this just like fun thing that maybe isn't productive or whatever, isn't super high priority for 10 minutes a day? What happens? Okay, cool. That actually some good stuff started to happen. What happens if I do that for 30 minutes a day? Right. And you basically need to kind of prove to yourself that is trustworthy and a good use of time to prioritize inspiration and joy. And that's like a gradual little experiment that you can run by just giving yourself that time and seeing what happens.
I like the way you prioritize inspiration and joy. I think we don't do enough of that. I think we talked about this maybe at our event or some other podcasts that are all crossing lines, but like, yeah, I think it's important. Like if you, like you said, you love to do the writing, the creative, and I've talked to my coach about some other stuff as well, but you get so busy with the mundane, you get so busy with the task and the work. And like by the end of the day, you've got no more willpower left to actually do the things that bring you joy other than to go and just kind of coast. And so if you like really block off that time of your day, or as, you know, Cal Newport talks about, you know, the deep work, like schedule that time, make it something that you actually build in. My coach has been talking to me a lot about that as well. It's like, I don't have enough time to do some of the creative stuff that I want to do because, you know, work, task, end of the day, we've got 2 kids. It's like, last thing I want to do at night anymore is to open my computer up and do more work.
The reason I like treating it as like an experiment is because it's my experience that when you prioritize that stuff, you actually like good stuff starts to happen. You actually start to realize that it's not just like something you want to do for fun. It's like, no, actually, like I will get results if I do this. That's like a big thing that people is like experiential, and people have to have the direct experience of that to trust it.
Yes, agreed completely. I am so guilty of this. Like Jason and I've talked about this. I used to be an artist and I stopped doing all of that because it wasn't productive. It wasn't going to like make me money, quote unquote. But I think the other maybe side effect of spending that time and leaning into those moments of inspiration is to come full circle. It allows opportunities for downloads. You know, Jason just talked about coasting. I think we're all just stuck in this world where we're bombarded with tasks and notifications and things that keep us busy, that we don't even allow our minds the opportunity to have that freedom to see the opportunities, to even experience a download.
Yeah. And I would say like, I also think about reality as being nonlinear. You know, in a linear reality, the idea is like, if I do X, then Y will occur. Right. So I do my tasks and then Y will occur. And like, I'm the one who's making Y occur. And it's been my experience that there seems to be a higher order intelligence that is just moving the chess pieces around you, right? And making things happen. And this starts to show up in terms of synchronicities is one way that it'll show up. And it wants you to move into your authenticity. Like it wants you to kind of do you. And so like maybe you do the painting, you don't get a download, but like a new client comes in out of nowhere. And you're like, well, how'd that happen? That's random. You just like get introduced to the perfect person to join your team. And you're like, huh. And it's like, you just have this happen enough times. You're like, okay, like I get it. Like there's something else bigger that's like a part of like why my life is the way that it is and what's happening. And it wants me to do these things. And there's like a non-linear fashion in which these things show up.
Do you find those that fashion or the synchronicities or whatever can really only occur like when you start to go down this path? I think you said earlier, like you didn't really care about all this back in the West Village. You were just kind of doing your thing. But once you got on this path is when you became more aware. So like for these synchronicities to begin to happen and become, you know, more dialed into some of those fashions, stuff like that, you've got to like consciously enter that path.
I don't know if they were always happening and I just didn't see them, or that they started to happen with a greater frequency and I started to see them. But I can tell you, I never had this stuff. I was not aware of it happening when I was just like bulldozing my way through success mode. now, I mean, it's just like it's happening constantly. It's like life feels so magical because there's all of these things happen where you're like, there's just no way like that, like something so perfectly could happen, and it just is like a much more fun way to live. And often it a lot of like really good outcomes come out of that stuff too. So I personally believe like this stuff, you start to clue into this stuff once you start to focus on your awareness. Because in order to see a synchronicity, you have to be aware of it. And your awareness is kind of the main input. And there's one other really important point here that I want to stress. One of the reasons why I think the awareness journey is promotes synchronicity is because a lot of the synchronicity is a coherence, so like a match between what's happening or what's changing in your inner world and what's happening in the outer world. And so like in order to see that, you have to have some attention on the inner world, because otherwise you would never be able to see the connection. And so I think that's another reason why, this path, you start to see them more often.
I agree completely. And this is jogging my memory actually this is like right when I met Jason. So 10 years ago at this point, but people used to make fun of me for this. I would wake up every day and I'd be like, today's the best day of my life. And I'm going to choose to make that happen. And like, as cheesy as that sounds, and I started to tell people around me, I'm like, have the best day ever. Like, and it was pretty wild because every day was a great day because I chose to like see it through that lens. And it's really that simple, like shit would happen, of course. And I'd be like, it's all right. It's still going to be the best day of my life. And, then like the next thing would happen. I'd be like, see, I told you it's the best day of my life. Like, and so I think my question to you in this is, how do we break this down for people and make this tangible? Like maybe not everybody is at the point where they're wanting to go on an ayahuasca journey. But you've talked about like you meditated for years prior to this. And I know a lot of people do that. I do that. But like, how do we help people? Is it just awareness? Like, how do we get them to that?
Yeah. So I think like for me, like meditation's great. Like if that calls to you, like you should definitely do that, or look at other practices that promote stillness. Breath work's a good one. Chanting. I mean, even dancing. But for me, I think like one of the questions that I had with all that stuff was like, it still felt quite disconnected from my everyday life.
Sure.
Where I would have 20 minutes on the cushion in the morning, feel great. And then I just, turn into like an intense like ball of
okay,
like,
KPIs.
Yeah. Just like that whole thing. For me, the big practice that really helped me start to see the connection that was really useful and really easy was just like, I created an iPhone note on my phone and I started to write down every time I was triggered. And you might not have to like go through the practice of that, but a question that you could ask yourself is, would it be possible for a person to be in that situation and not feel that way? And so like, I'll give you an example. I would be in a coffee line in New York City where I was living at the time when I got started with this. It'd be moving really slowly and I would be freaking pissed. And, the person next to me is like, doesn't have a care in the world, right? And so like, what's the difference between them and me? We're in the same situation.
Yeah.
But our consciousness is different. And so as you start to tally up these experiences, what starts to happen is like, for me at least, was like a recognition of like, I am the creator of these reactions. And it's like, well, now I actually am empowered to do something about it. All the other stuff, the meditation is great as well, but just like start noticing when you're triggered and ask yourself, like, is it possible to not be triggered in the situation? Like, is there a person alive that has not been triggered in the situation? And the answer is unequivocally yes.
I think what I love about this is like, this is essentially how we can shape how we experience life. Like you're talking about standing in the coffee line and getting upset, and the person next to you is not. Like they're experiencing life at a different frequency, a different way. Like this is all in how we experience life. If you're not happy with how you're experiencing life, like start addressing, what are you not happy experiencing? Are you not happy with the experience you had in the coffee line? Okay. Why is that? What is that makes you not happy about that? And you could begin to generally shape and change the way you experience your life. And I think if we begin to look at it that way, and like it's within our control, it's only up to us how we react, respond, and experience. I think if we begin to look at it that way, it's a whole different journey, a whole different mindset and how we address this.
Exactly. Like you have that, it's like the shifting from life happening to me, which is like victimhood, right? It's like everyone else's fault for why we feel the way we feel, to like, wait a second, like I can take responsibility here.
Exactly.
And that's a very much more powerful frame and a much more enjoyable way to live.
100%. So I do have one kind of hard transition here, something that I've been thinking a lot about, because like we kind of exist in the same world in this B2B tech software space. Like let's talk about how this message is resonating within the tech landscape with leaders, and kind of what you're seeing as the need to have this more consciousness, awareness, experience message resonating throughout this world.
I think it's starting to pick up steam. And I think it's a lot of that's happening through executive coaching. So I think a lot of leaders are working with executive coaches, and there's like more and more coaches that are doing developmental work. So it's like there's like performance oriented coaches where it's like, I'm going to have you hit your goal. And then there's developmental coaches that are more talking about the consciousness stuff. And so like a lot of these people are leaders at companies are getting exposed to this. They're seeing results and they're going, okay, well, this is important. Like maybe other people on my team should be doing this. And so like, that's exciting. I think there's a portion of people in, entrepreneurs and high performers. These people are generally like pushing the edge, right? They're trying to get an edge in performance. And so like a lot of them are doing things like psychedelics. They are like experimenting there, and they're having their minds opened and going, okay, cool. Like there's more here. And so that seems to be a trend. More and more people are talking about this that are
This is true.
figures in society. It's like Aaron Rodgers, best quarterback in the NFL. He's talking about his journey, right? Big time people in business, are out there talking about this stuff. Like more and more people at the top of the game are talking about this stuff. Like I just actually did a podcast today with a friend of mine who is basically kind of the inner work coach to like literally world champion UFC athletes. And they're in this stuff. And he was just on Joe Rogan talking about it. And so like, how many people did that reach? So, this stuff is starting to spread. And I think it's still seen as a nice to have by a lot of people instead of like the fundamental thing. But I think that's just a kind of expected phase of the journey. That like I had that phase, and you just keep going. And then all of a sudden, like, wait a second, like, actually, maybe this is more than nice to have. Actually, maybe like this is kind of like actually the main thing. Right.
Yeah. Okay. I talk about this on almost every episode because I'm obsessed with the concept of ripples. So I'd be curious about your perspective on like, obviously this is still an ongoing journey for you, but what ripples have you seen to your teams, to your family, to even as far as your community from your expanded awareness and consciousness?
Well, let me start off by saying that I think the greatest gift that we can give the world is more about our being instead of our doing. And it's really about how we show up. And there's like a lot of metaphysical things I could talk about there in terms of like you're holding a frequency, people are kind of assimilating to that. But one way to think about it is just like, have you ever been around somebody that just like exudes love? How does that person make you feel?
Yep.
And then how are you showing up after you're around that person? So that's like a really big thing. And I think like a teacher once said to me is, when we talk about purpose in our life, we think about, oh, well, I gotta, start the company or do the thing or have a big family. And like, yes, do all of those things. But I think, someone once said to me, he's like, my purpose is to hold a particular frequency and invite in all those that want to experience it. And that's about the quality of your emotions and the quality of your being and how open your heart is. And that has an immeasurable effect on everyone around you and the planet. But I think like one of the biggest things that I've seen in my own journey is like, I've just started talking about this stuff. I just am out there. I'm like, I'm like flying the freak flag. And what's been really cool is so many people have been like, dude, I am into this too. And like, I feel so seen because you're talking about it. And like, it makes me feel like I'm not a weirdo.
Yeah.
And like, that makes my heart sing because I know how that person felt when this was like my weird little secret. And it has also created permission for other people to talk about it, where it's like, yeah, well, shit, if like Scott's out here, talking about consciousness on LinkedIn, like, I guess that's cool. I guess that's okay. I guess I can, like, he's still alive. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the start of the ripples I'm starting to see. And I think the big idea that I'm really hoping people get with my book is that you can go on this journey and you don't have to give up all the other things. You don't have to give up the success. You don't have to give up like all the things you want to do. Like you might not want to do the same things anymore after a while being on this path, but you certainly don't have to give them up. And I think that's like what I hope the tech community and the B2B community hears is like, it's not this choice of like, I'm successful or I'm spiritual, or I'm successful and I'm going on a mindfulness journey. It's not that. It's like, you can do both. And in fact, they can work together and you can have better outcomes in both.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like the word you used earlier was how do you integrate the two and to make, the work life, personal life, whatever is like better, more enhanced, a better experience. I think by integrating the two. But you mentioned the book, so let's go there for a second. Newly published author, Sir Britton.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about the book. Obviously, you talk a little bit about how to integrate that, which I think is a very important, even tactical step on this journey around like you don't have to be one or the other. The two can coexist. But tell us a bit more about the book and kind of what the journey is that's going to take us on.
Yeah. So the book is called Conscious Accomplishment: How to Use Personal Achievement for Spiritual Growth. So it's exactly about all the things we've been talking about. And it's broken into 3 parts. The first one is how to work on your awareness exactly where you are, using some of the practices that I alluded to with like noting the triggers, going into them, starting to see your consciousness. The second part is how do you work on your awareness through in the process of achieving things? And what are all the reasons and things that get in the way of people kind of doing both at the same time? And what are the complexities that introduced when you do both at the same time? And how do you move through those? So that's part 2 of the book. And part 3 of the book is okay, all this awareness stuff and all this holding both at the same time, how does that change the way you accomplish things? And it does. There's like certain things that are no longer required that you might have once did. And there's new things that open up for you as you deepen on this path. And so it's kind of like, I think really a guidebook for the ambitious person who is like, all right, there's maybe something here with this whole spirituality, mindfulness stuff. And I do want to have both. And how do I do that? And even for the people that are on the journey and feeling like they're struggling a little bit, it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to kind of hold both at the same time and it's really hard. And I acknowledge that it is. What can I do to continue on this path with more ease and grace?
Love that. We'll drop that in the show notes. I'll be starting a book club if anybody wants to join. This is awesome.
I appreciate that.
You're right. I think it's a very good time to kind of put this out into the world. It's like we kind of fly that a very similar freak flag with you. So we'll take arms with you out there in the universe. You know, as we start to put more of that type of content out into LinkedIn, we're getting more response and more. You know, I know Sam, you get a lot of responses from friends saying thank you for putting it out there. You know, putting this message out there. It's helpful. The people are trying to figure out how to kind of avoid, maybe avoid's the bad word, but avoid this life or this feeling or experience that gets created, especially in the tech world with all these high valuations, high expectations, big numbers and goals and everything you got to hit. People are experiencing all this burnout and they want to feel good about the path they're on. They want to feel good about the work they're doing and the experience they're having, but they kind of struggle with how to, you know, start that journey. So I really feel like, especially with the audience you have and kind of the in the B2B tech SaaS, whatever world you want to call it, like it's going to be a very helpful message, you know, for those that are trying to figure out how to start this journey. And we're grateful that we were able to catch you at the launch of this message and book.
We're in arms in this thing. You know, it's like we need to all come together and support each other to create a more harmonious and prosperous and joyful society. And I would say business culture. I don't think everyone's going to become a monk. Like that's just not what's going to happen. Right. Like it's like, we're all going to have to learn collectively, like how to weave this all together. And the more people that are out there talking about it and being helpful and supporting others directly, like I know you guys have retreats and ways you work with people directly, like the more we're going to make that transformation as a society.
We would be remiss in not asking you, but tell us about Conscious Talent and how that is impacting businesses.
So I started this business, Conscious Talent, like 5 months ago. And the idea is that like, as you go on this journey as a leader, you start to see the world differently. You just do. Like, you just start to see and do things differently. And you want to surround yourself with other leaders when you're creating something who also see the world that way. And I'm not saying in like a way, like you have to think the same as me. It's just things like, hey, I look inward first when shit comes up. You know, I take personal responsibility for my stuff, like things like that. Like it's more like kind of a mindset and a philosophy of living. Yeah. So what we do is we partner with those type of leaders that are on some type of inner work or consciousness path. And then we help them find other really talented people to work with that are on the same journey, who are also excellent at what they do. And so, yeah, we're working with a lot of startups that are kind of building stuff to help humanity, everything from community platforms to journaling apps to AI companies, actually like consciousness communities. And we're out there helping them find aligned leaders for those businesses. And I think like part of like the vision here is like people should be able to show up and bring their full selves to work. And they should feel like this part of their life is welcomed.
Absolutely.
You know,
Encouraged.
it's like, don't hide it. Like, you don't need to hide it. Like, yeah, we're all on this evolutionary journey together. It's been incredible to see, yeah, just like how excited people are to work for in an aligned environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would say if people are out there, if you're like running a company, you know, look us up. We, kind of function, at least right now, like a traditional recruiting firm with just this whole blend. And then if you're an executive, we have this talent database that we're actively cultivating, where we're just trying to find great people who say, yes, this is what I'm all about. And this is the type of place I want to work. And, you know, when we find the right types of company that's looking for someone like you, like we can make that connection.
Okay. So we're going to drop all this in the show notes. But first of all, I'll just say from experience, Scott's a great LinkedIn follow. So do yourself a favor. And
Thank you.
I mean, I think I've been following you for maybe 6 or 7 months. And there's been so many times where I text Jason, I'm like, this guy, he gets it. So thank you for
Kindred
spreading
spirits.
the good word.
That's right.
Okay, in closing, this is kind of a left field, but was there a book that you read at some point that kind of reshaped your worldview?
Two things come up for me. One is I loved the surrender experiment. That was huge.
Okay.
And then I also liked David Hawkins' Power versus Force.
Hmm.
That was a big one for me. And there's been lots of other ones along the way, but like those two, there was like clear, like, whoa, okay. Like there's a different way of seeing things.
I love that. Okay. We'll add it to
There
the
you go.
reading list. This has been so great. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Congratulations on your book. I hope it's a national bestseller. Thank you for putting out great talent into the world and creating a space where this is the norm and not the outside. So anything else, like anywhere else people should go to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, thanks. I think LinkedIn's great. I do write a Substack as well. And so that's a good place. You could just look for my name, Scott Britton, on Substack. It should come up. Sometimes I post on X, but yeah, I'm all over. You know where to
Okay.
find me. And I'm
All the
very
usual
honored,
places.
very honored to be on the show. It was really awesome to just spend this time with you guys, and I love what you're doing.
Well,
Thanks,
the
man.
feeling's
Likewise.
very mutual. Thank you for being here, friends. Go follow Scott. We'll see you next time.
See y'all.